Hello and welcome back. Picking up where Secretary Barrett and General Raymond, General Wallet left off, my name is George Pullen. I'm the Chief Space Economist for Way Economy. I'm also the author of the new book, Blockchain the Space Economy. So I'm joined today by two practitioners in the commercial space that really need no introduction. My friend John Jason. John Serafini is the CEO of Hawkeye 360, and Jason Kim is with Space C2 Business Development Executive of Raytheon. Welcome, gentlemen.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Nice to be here.
All right, guys, let's jump right in after that fantastic panel. John, I'm going to start with you. So we're hearing a little bit about what are some of the impediments for commercial systems adoption, and what do you see for the biggest impediment for at-scale adoption in the U.S. government domain?
Thank you, George. I'm not sure I can provide much better testimony than that of Secretary Barrett and General Raymond, who spoke so eloquently and well. But ultimately, for us here at Hawkeye 360 doing commercial RF, it's about innovation and delivering new and unique capabilities to the warfighter, to the analyst, to the decision maker, and doing so in a manner that is quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible, and as cost effective as possible. To do that, we sense three main areas where we can see change, positive change. The first is philosophical, right? The U.S. government and its stakeholders have long embraced a traditional format of acquisition focused on solving specific requirements at specific fixed points in time. We want the U.S. government to think more creatively towards a hybrid architecture. Obviously, there'll always be a place for the national systems that are built through more traditional GOGO and GOCO contract vehicles, but importantly, we think there's an increasingly larger area of focus for commercial capabilities that leverage private non-taxpayer dollars and can move at a much faster rate. So the first is from a philosophical viewpoint, embracing the hybrid architecture of tomorrow. The second is go through the research, development, testing, and evaluation process, engage with the whole ecosystem of commercial providers, and then pick your winners and go long and deep with your winners, regardless of whether that's comms or EO or launch or RF in the remote sensing world. But help those companies secure additional financing and gain greater customer traction by building programs of record through Congress that they can scale into as the quantum and sophistication of their constellation builds and scales. And if there's concerns about data integrity and cybersecurity, work with the commercial ecosystem to help them bring the TTPs necessary to be successful in the long term. And the third is we need to match not just technical innovation and business innovation, but we need to match that with procurement innovation and continuing to emphasize and encourage new and unique contract vehicles like OTAs as a means for bringing commercial capabilities to the warfighter, to the analyst, to the decision maker, better, faster, stronger. Thank you.
Procurement innovation. I love that as being one of the three tenets of innovation. Jason, turn to you. One of the things that we heard both Secretary Barrett and General Raymond talking about was the importance of interoperability and, of course, also the need to work with our partners. So what challenges do you see for U.S. space-oriented companies as they look to export their products and services?
Yeah, thanks, George, for having me on. And it's great to see you, John, again. Tremendous capability at Hawkeye 360, so it's great to see the progress there. George, at the end of the day, the export laws are there for a reason, and they're valid. But there's a couple of problems that I see. One of the greatest hurdles is the timeliness of approvals for those licenses. It's always good to hear from Secretary Barrett and General Raymond. I always learn something new, and they talked a lot about speed. So the first problem is export control is the longest lead hurdle. It usually takes 3 to 6 months in terms of approval times on average to even have a technical discussion with our allies. Second, it limits our ability to articulate our U.S. industry discriminators, our technology differentiators at the speed of relevance. And that's exactly what Secretary Barrett and General Raymond talked about. So possible solution is having more government engagement, coordination, and ITAR sponsorship of U.S. industry capability briefings. I partook on some of those briefings, and I think there could be a lot of streamlining to enable a faster conduit to enable our allies better understanding and adoption of our space technology. There's also some reluctance, and what I mean by that is export limitations can cause reluctance when it comes to engaging the larger addressable international market for space capabilities. I'll add that some of that reluctance has to do with the way U.S. space industry companies is set up versus foreign companies. Many of those companies outside of the U.S. are part of their governments or heavily subsidized by them. That makes it really difficult to be competitive for U.S. companies who have internal financial considerations. So those are just some of the challenges. Now, I will say that Secretary Barrett and General Raymond talked a lot about interoperability, like you said. So coalition interoperability is a key. What I'll leave you with is international coalition interoperability. The world is increasingly reliant on space for various activities and missions, like first response and disaster relief and counterterrorism. A lot of the stuff that Hawkeye 360 goes and finds out more about, right, and provides that data. With that in mind, all U.S. services, allies, partners must be able to connect networks and rapidly share that information, make it accessible to ensure an allied defense posture. We heard a lot about that in the previous panel about partnerships, international partnerships. The challenge here is common standards. Those standards are going to define the interoperability, having practices and doctrines for the international space capabilities. So thanks.
I love that, Jason. It's a little bit of a turn on what Secretary Barrett was saying, right? It's the speed of electrons, not the speed of gears when it comes to cooperation speed. So I like that. I like that. John, turning back to you, obviously this year we've seen a lot of nations sort of break into the new space race, right? Obviously, China has had 35 launches. We've had 35 or so launches. They've had a recent successful touchdown with a lunar mission, where they're going to be collecting samples from the ocean of storms on the moon. So my question to you, John, is what lessons can we learn from watching the Chinese approach, understanding, as Secretary Barrett had said, that our way is different?
Well, that's a great question, and thank you, George. And Jason, I just echo for you for a moment. Thank you for your kind words about Hawkeye and appreciation for your organization as investors in Hawkeye. I definitely agree with the vast majority of what you shared in the last question about exportability. I'd mention, of course, the importance of ensuring a level playing field for our commercial capabilities and being able to compete with similar companies outside of the U.S. who aren't operating under restrictions that we are. And the second, of course, is making sure that we're equipping our international Five Eyes and other allies with the tools and capabilities that U.S. companies like Hawkeye, like Plant, like BlackSky can create and make available to them. On the subject of China, Secretary Barrett brought up very artfully and well that they're playing with a different playbook than we are. They have a different approach. Obviously, as a centrally managed economy, they have different ways of doing things. For them, it's less about a whole of government approach and more of a whole of country approach. And they've certainly identified space as a high ground that they need to try to own. And they're marshaling their diplomatic, their political, their military, their economic forces in order to be able to do that. They're creating a significant amount of financial resources and putting it behind their construction capabilities. But it's not just about government centric, it's also about their commercial world. Their conglomerates, state-sponsored conglomerates, are building satellites at record numbers. They're launching satellites at record numbers. They're building comms constellations. They're building remote sensing constellations. And they're moving it with a source of a sense of purpose. So how does the United States compete in that environment? And I think we have to recognize that there's going to be a natural imbalance between the resources available to us moving forward in our national priorities and the requirements that our nation asks the Defense Department, the intelligence community, our security apparatus to be able to accomplish. There's a delta there between need and resources. And the only way in which we can fill that need is by a very healthy adoption and embrace of commercial capabilities, and recognizing that a hybrid architecture can allow us to do a lot more with less. Obviously, existing policy states, hey, if there are capabilities, or excuse me, if there are requirements the U.S. government has that can be fulfilled by the commercial ecosystem, you should do so. And those that cannot be should be the area of the defense industrial base under GOGO and GOCO contracting models. And I think we should really look to emphasize that. Can commercial systems do 100% of what the national systems can do? Of course not. But if you can start to approach some of that, you can move and offload those requirements into much more cost-efficient, cost-effective capabilities while preserving your additional dollars to do more for less. And there's a lot of other benefits of embracing commercial capabilities. What we point towards is the vast number of different value propositions. The commercial world can provide collection capacity to augment national systems. We can provide data analytics that are fastly moving and being delivered to the customer with low amounts of latency to meet the tactical warfighter requirements. So a lot of upside, not just from a collection capacity, but from a traditional ISR perspective of being able to support the warfighter with new and unique insights. Missile defense capabilities mentioned earlier, performing left of launch analysis to detect activities related to missile launch, maritime domain awareness capabilities of tracking adversary vessels, as well as legal activities, smuggling and human smuggling, and illegal fishing, piracy, etc. These are all things well within the domain of commercial capabilities today to assist the U.S. government with, and that's how we compete with China. It's by embracing the value and the intellectual property and the private non-taxpayer capital that we bring to bear with our commercial sector. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate that. It also leads me to my next question, actually really nicely for Jason, and that is, we heard a lot about the need to both innovate and go fast. John definitely expounded on a few of those areas where we might be able to go fast and cooperate. But what recommendations might you have for the incoming administration on ways that we could leverage all this great commercial innovation across the space industry?
Yeah, hey, thanks for that question, George. And I'll circle back to what John just said in a minute. But I think I'd say the government should continue doing what they're doing already and encourage and leverage commercial innovation. We've seen this through things like OTAs and accelerated programs. Secretary Barrett and General Raymond talked about that in the previous panel. We want to see more of that. We want to see this. We've seen this through things like non-traditional companies working with traditional companies in a partnership, and really providing the best to bear, from both companies to provide the best solution for the customers. So that brings me to partnerships. Another area where we could benefit from is more communication of key capability gaps, so that we all can invest in our tech development more appropriately. So that's to my last point about partnerships. There's a real opportunity to take advantage of commercially sourced data like Hawkeye 360 is providing, much like Maxar's Worldview Legion constellation, which we're building the payloads for. In this case, you get commercial and aerospace and defense innovation in one package. So again, you get the 1-2 punch. We're also partnering with allies through our UK Team Artemis work to provide control of small satellites and mission processing for the MOD and other international partners powered by an open architecture. Again, going back to what we talked about before about interoperability and standards, that open architecture enables multi-domain, multi-missions using a common enterprise ground framework. So you get, in that case, real ally collaboration across the U.S. and the allies. Thank you.
I love it, Jason. It looks like we have just a couple quick minutes left here, so I'm going to go to my last question with a little bit of a moderator prerogative. So, obviously, as an academic, but also as a patriot, I serve in the Marine Corps. The policy community has long recognized the need for the U.S. to maintain leadership in emerging and critical technologies. Those industries, as they apply to space, is no different, right? So what would you recommend, and this can be to both of you, what would you recommend and what you would consider to be the most strategic national importance in the space industry right now?
Well, I think you're hearing from me loud and clear. It's all about embracing commercial, right? And we see ourselves as an augmentation, value. There's tip queue, dynamic tip queue, fully orchestrated value to be able to communicate and collaborate across multiple different platforms and multiple different modalities. There's a diversity and a resiliency aspect to engaging with commercial, not to mention also the reserve fleet impact and the ability to very rapidly replenish capabilities on orbit. And lastly, I point out for the commercial market, it's about shareability. This is unclassified data that's coming off of our systems and other systems that can be shared with coalition partners on our left and on our right. And so for all those different reasons, we think that the commercial ecosystem, not just commercial RF, but EO and SAR, these are national instruments that have to be leveraged and put into use to better achieve our national goals and outcomes.
Jason, I'll let you have the last word.
Yeah, George, I'll just add to what John just said eloquently, that there's a whole future workforce out there. From my perspective, commercial space industries are charting the course for the future of how to do development of these systems, how to do data analytics, how to do space. So the fact that these commercial space industries are creating jobs and providing STEM opportunities to provide those sparks of inspiration, and all the technical innovation that they're providing and disruptions they're providing really trains our future workforce. Again, totally agree with John in terms of the resiliency and area of strategic importance for the commercial space industry. It supports the government's move towards a hybrid, layered, and distributed space architecture for resiliency. These commercial constellations will play a big role in this layered architecture and allow us to, as a nation, operate through threats, pivoting quickly to the commercial satellites. And then finally, launch. That's one of the most immediately recognizable ways the commercial space industry is providing strategic national important capabilities. You've seen SpaceX, what they're doing. Rocket Labs, they have several successful launches under the belt. They just had a first reusable launch success. And so we think that these launch companies that are providing affordable access and frequent access to space gives us the ability to put more mission payloads and small sats, like General Raymond talked about earlier, into space on a more regular cadence, which is important for this hybrid architecture.
Excellent. Well, John Serafini and Jason Kim, thank you very much for being our guests today. I thought that was wonderful. The sky is definitely not the limit as we think about a digital force, whether that is a labor force or our fighting force. And now it's my privilege to turn things over to John Mulholland, Boeing VP and Program Manager for the ISS.